Most people believe airplanes are the safest machines humans have ever built. And statistically, that's true. But what most passengers never consider is why they're safe, and what happens when that trust is quietly traded for profit. This story doesn't begin with a crash. It begins in a cockpit, thousands of feet above the ground, with a pilot who sensed something wasn't right and refused to ignore it. He wasn't a rebel. He wasn't chasing attention. He was the kind of pilot airlines love, experienced, calm, by the book. Someone who believed the system worked because it had to. Until it didn't. In the years leading up to 2018, airlines were locked in a brutal race. Airbus had launched a fuel-efficient aircraft that airlines love. Boeing, the American giant, needed an answer fast. The result was an updated version of an older plane, sold as modern, efficient, and familiar enough that pilots wouldn't need expensive retraining. On paper, it was perfect. But in the cockpit, something felt off. During routine simulator sessions and early flights, pilots began noticing odd behavior. The nose of the aircraft would dip unexpectedly, not violently, not dramatically, just enough to make seasoned professionals pause and ask themselves, why did it do that? At first, they were told it was normal, a software adjustment, nothing to worry about. Then one pilot experienced it again, this time stronger. The plane pushed its nose down, as if it had decided on its own that the pilot was wrong. He corrected it. The plane pushed back. That moment stayed with him. Back on the ground, he dug deeper, asked questions, reviewed manuals. He noticed something strange, a system influencing flight behavior that wasn't fully explained. A system designed to make the plane feel like older models so airlines could skip costly pilot training. That system had authority over the aircraft's nose, and pilots weren't told the full truth about it. He raised concerns internally. The response was polite, professional, and dismissive. He was told the system couldn't activate unless something went seriously wrong, that it relied on reliable sensors, that it was impossible for it to overpower trained pilots. But aviation history is built on one lesson: nothing is impossible at altitude. What troubled him most wasn't just the system itself, it was the culture around it. Questions were treated as obstacles, doubts were framed as misunderstandings. Speed to market mattered more than uncomfortable conversations. And this pilot understood something critical. If a system can move the plane without you fully understanding it, you are no longer fully in control. Still, the world kept flying. Then, in late 2018, a brand new aircraft went down shortly after takeoff. Everyone on board was killed. At first, it was described as a tragic accident, mechanical failure, pilot errors. But when details emerged, the pilot's stomach dropped. The flight profile looked familiar. The behavior of the aircraft, painfully familiar. The same unexplained nose-down commands. The same struggle against a system pilots barely knew existed. He waited. Surely now the alarms would sound. Instead, the planes kept flying. Then it happened again. Another crash. Another brand new aircraft. Another flight lost within minutes of takeoff. At that point, silence was no longer an option. The pilot realized something chilling. What he had questioned years earlier was not a theoretical risk. It was a design decision, one that had already cost hundreds of lives. And it wasn't just an engineering failure. It was a decision to minimize training, a decision to avoid regulatory delays, a decision to trust software over human instinct without telling the humans. The pilot stepped forward, not loudly, not dramatically. He documented everything: emails, reports, simulator data. He spoke to investigators, regulators, journalists, knowing exactly what it could cost him. Careers in aviation are built on reputation, and whistleblowers rarely keep theirs intact. But he also knew this. Every day the planes stayed in the air, more people were at risk. Passengers who trusted the logo on the tail and the country it came from. This wasn't about one company anymore. It was about an industry that had convinced itself it was too big to fail, and one pilot who refused to let that be true. When the second aircraft went down, the world finally stopped pretending this was coincidence. Aviation authorities grounded fleets almost overnight. Airlines scrambled. Newsrooms filled with experts pointing at charts, software diagrams, and technical terms most passengers had never heard before. But buried beneath all of that noise was a simple truth. Pilots had been fighting a system they didn't know they were fighting. Investigators uncovered what the pilot had feared all along. A single sensor could trigger the system. If that sensor fed bad data, from a bird strike, debris, or simple failure, the aircraft believed it was stalling. And when that belief kicked in, the system pushed the nose down again and again. Pilots could counter it, but only if they knew exactly what was happening, and only if they reacted in seconds. Many never got that chance. As the details came out, the industry faced an uncomfortable reckoning. Internal documents showed concerns raised early. Emails revealed pressure to move fast, to reassure regulators, to keep the aircraft classified as just another version of a familiar plane. That classification saved billions, and it cost lives. The pilot watched all of this unfold from the sidelines, knowing he had seen the warning signs years earlier. He had trusted that the system would correct itself, that someone higher up would step in, that safety would ultimately win. It didn't. Only after tragedy did accountability begin. Executives were called before lawmakers. Engineers testified under oath. Regulators admitted they relied too heavily on manufacturer assurances. For the first time in decades, the public saw behind the curtain of an industry that had always projected confidence and control. And the pilot, he wasn't celebrated. Whistleblowers rarely are. His career stalled. His name became a quiet footnote in reports and hearings. The system he challenged didn't thank him for being right. It tolerated him for surviving the truth. But something changed because he spoke. Training requirements were rewritten. Software authority was reduced. Transparency rules tightened. Pilots were finally told exactly what systems were on board and how much control they truly had. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress paid for in blood. This story isn't about one aircraft or one company. It's about what happens when complexity outpaces honesty, when software grows more powerful than the people flying the machine, and the people in charge decide not to explain it. Every passenger who boards a plane carries invisible trust. Trust in engineers they'll never meet, in regulators they'll never see, in pilots who are expected to handle anything, even when they aren't given all the information. One pilot understood that trust isn't automatic. It has to be earned every single day. And sometimes earning it means risking everything to say, "This isn't safe," even when no one wants to listen. Because aviation doesn't fail loudly at first. It fails quietly, in emails, in meetings, in decisions that save money instead of time, until the sky delivers the consequences. Today, millions still fly on aircraft shaped by those lessons. Most passengers will never know the name of the pilot who spoke up early. But every safer procedure, every clearer manual, every moment a pilot fully understands their aircraft, that's his legacy. Not fame, not recognition, just fewer empty seats. And that may be the most human outcome in an industry built on machines. If this story made you see aviation differently, not as a miracle of technology, but as a balance between humans and systems, take a moment to engage with this video. Share it with someone who flies often. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Stories like this only matter if they're remembered, and awareness is the quiet force that keeps powerful industries honest. Because the next safety breakthrough might not come from a boardroom or a press release. It might come from one person who refuses to stay silent. And history has shown us just how much that can matter.